Hi. After we had an idea of how the designs how the process of designing interactions or interfaces, especially on computer systems, we now move on how to conceptualize interactions. And now we have some what important concepts that we need to learn here is that design before the design has been created, there are bases or there are aspects that has been considered to be able to have an idea on what designs would appear to the users. So let's start with this conceptualization of a design for an interface. So in the diagram, in the image, you will see a robot delivering a food to a child or a certain table if you want to make it as an example in an actual fast food chain such as what we are in the city in Iligan City or around the campus. Here we have a proof of concept first that a particular idea can be can work using existing technology. Or sometimes we tend to promote or to already design aspects while the technology is limited yet, because some technologies will be discovered or will our designs will guide technologies to be created because of our appropriate interaction designs or designs of technology that we want to create. So sometimes there are aspects of technology that might be created because of its because a certain design demands for it, and sometimes it will also use as a guide for some of the future designs. One example of conceptualizing design are looking at movies. When movies introduce some aspects of design, how they look at future designs of technology, or how interactive later the interfaces of the future would be, is partly an inspiration for those who will be developing technology. But first, we will have a proof of concept. For example, here, if you want to deliver to design in a robot that will deliver a certain food to a table or a certain area of the um, fast food restaurant. Here, the figure described here is that a non-speaking robot waiter in China and Shanghai, what would be gained if it could also talk with customers. So initially, this robot cannot actually talk, but it can be conceptualized as a talking robot later that will deliver or maybe take orders from the customer. But when we think of this as a design, we need to identify first, or since this is a proof of concept that we can actually create something like a human being that will interact with the customers, maybe in another interfaces. Although the most appropriate one is we already aware that the customers can directly interact with the robot. However, with the limited, I'm not sure if ChatGPT will be capable to be embedded in this technology. But if somehow the interaction of a person would be in a different way, such as press the button or whatever, and the computer will just, the robot will confirm the order, that would be another part of the interactions. Another is if you can converse directly to the robot without without pressing some buttons, that would be a very um, realistic design or conceptualization of our design. But uh, when we think of, for example, implementing this interaction or this robot in your restaurant, you need to think of what particular problem has been addressing here instead of just directly involved with the technology. Because there are a lot of questions. In our previous lesson, where in designs, we'll focus on answering problems rather than what we want to do. So here we have to ask important questions before we will consider designs. Number one, how intelligent does it have to be? Since we have limited support for interactions, especially for computers. Although ChatGPT has now proved that maybe we have difficulty identifying whether the text is created by humans or AI. That would be another interesting question to ask if we need to implement that in that particular design. Second, how would it need to move to appear to be talking? So how would it need to move to appear? So meaning how how it will with how it will talk to the customer, for instance. What would the customers think of it if they're talking to a robot, especially the designs is not that very human? Would they think it is too gimmicky and get easily tired of it? So sometimes, so maybe they are interested only at first, but later they will realize that it's not really that helpful for them. And next is, would it always be a pleasure for them to engage with the robot, not knowing what it would say on each new visit to the restaurant? So normally robots have spiel or something like the normally talk as a starting point. So how will you vary it, and how much technology support, how intelligent it can be, or varied depending on what he or she encounters? Could it be designed to be a grumpy extrovert or a funny waiter? What might be the limitation of this voice assisted approach? So these are questions that you need to ask in considering design. So you first need to conceptualize, considering a various aspect that will contribute to something of your that will contribute something to your design in the future or in addressing the problem. The number one concern that we need to be practical. In fact, we need to consider the problem first. Why do we create such technology first? What are the problems that we need to solve, and what might be the other implications that go along with the design of the technology? We don't need to only consider the solution to the problem, but we also need to think of some of the implications of the creative designs, because that would be critical for the business, for instance, in considering not on considering a focus on design only, but of course the other implications, such as would it be boring in the future to interact with this one, and would especially for Filipino culture who keep on asking something, and how will the robot support for that on, or would it be as example here, funny waiter type? Does it introduce jokes to customers, and how sensitive it is to the reaction of the person? So there are a lot of things that we considered to be programmed in this technology, and of course the practicality of putting such technology into your restaurant, for instance, it needs to be considered.